Welcome to one of the few truly independent and sponsor-free podcasts on this island Earth. If you like these free first-hour episodes, consider getting twice as much with THC Plus and treat yourself to the full 2-hour interviews as they're designed to be, where things only get deeper and more interesting behind the curtain. A Plus subscription gets you 5 new shows a month and a full archive of great interviews with amazing folks going all the way back to 2010. That is the gist, though there are other details, benefits, and bonus features you can hear more about at the end of this episode or in the show notes, where you can also find the links to sign up and join the club at thehighersidechats.com. Or if you want to listen on Spotify, sign up through Patreon. Enjoy.
The planet's puppet masters almost surely have a plan. There's clearly maybe something there beyond the realm of man. And until we've thoroughly tested every last close-chested view, I find the more we think we know, the less we really do. Where would we be without THC? 'Cause we know they're lying to us, baby, just don't know to what degree. Where would we be without THC? The Higher Side Chat Show, Greg Carlwood and company.
Rock me like a hurricane, people. From the Sunshine State, I'm Greg Carlwood. And we know the awakening process can be damn near addicting. Who doesn't love a drip of dopamine from each new mind-blowing realization or an energetic charge from a freshly questioned assumption? Though for a lot of us, these exciting aspects might come peppered throughout stages of dread, paranoia, deep anger, and a wide range of other negative emotions that naturally crop up when learning about the vast damage-causing behaviors baked right into our culture, the multitude of manipulations, and the never-ending vectors for toxicity. But eventually, it should drive us to feel more self-empowered and competent in navigating a very tricky reality. Because in a fallen world of fake science, mass mind control, and manipulated, dishonest data, there is very little you can trust outside of your own discernment and intuition. And really, that's probably enough. Well, this is just a small handful of the things I've picked up from the many hours spent listening to Dr. Kelly Brogan discuss the way reality really works and challenge all her own previously held assumptions, from germ theory and the globe to self-healing and manifestation. If you're unfamiliar, Dr. Brogan is a holistic psychiatrist and New York Times Bestselling Author of titles like A Mind of Your Own, The Truth About Depression and How Women Can Heal Their Bodies and Reclaim Their Lives, Own Yourself, The Surprising Path Beyond Depression, Anxiety, and Fatigue to Reclaiming Your Authenticity, Vitality, and Freedom, and The Reclaimed Woman, Love Your Shadow, Embody Your Feminine Gifts, and Experience the Specific Pleasure of Who You Are. She completed her psychiatric training and fellowship at NYU Medical Center after graduating from Cornell University Medical College and has a degree from MIT in Systems Neuroscience. She is also the co-editor of the landmark textbook Integrative Therapies for Depression, as well as the founder of the online healing program Vital Mind Reset and the membership community Vital Life Project, and the host of the Reclamation Radio podcast. During the COVID years, I learned about her as one of the infamous disinformation dozen, alongside some of the wisest people I could find at the time, and I'm lucky to have her here now. The alternative health educator, provocateur, big pharma critic, and original reclaimed woman, Dr. Kelly Brogan. Welcome to the Higher Side.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm psyched for this. Thanks for doing it. I obviously wrote that intro largely about the psychology of conspiracy awakening, let's say, which I consider to be a big part of the value I've gotten from listening to you, but also how that meshes with male and female dynamics and cycles of trauma and parenting even, as well as taking ownership and responsibility of our success and happiness, all sorts of good stuff. But I'm sure you understand as well as anyone that it's hard to be an awakened truth seeker and not fall into negative thought patterns when we see so many things are backwards and toxic, yet our mental and inner state seems to be the most important aspect to health, so it almost sounds like a catch-22, you know?
Yes, you've nailed it. It only took me 15 years to come to that, dilemma, that crossroads where I had the opportunity, probably even beginning a few years ago, to consider the yield, right? Like, what is the point? What am I actually getting out of this truthing, this awareness, this experience of reality that has paradigmatically shifted from what I thought it was to now what I'm so certain it is, and everybody needs to know, right? So the exquisite pain of living in an unshared reality that most of us experience when we learn a different story about what is, and we set about recruiting, right, like new members of
Yes.
our reality. And I was just thinking this morning about, how the balance between the superiority that seems to attend truthing, right? And we could go into all the rescuer archetypes that get activated when, we think that we have figured it out and cracked the code of everything, and we know what's behind the veil. There is typically a sense of superiority, particularly over those who don't yet know, right? So we use slurs like sheep or whatever,
Yeah.
but it's also typically a sense of superiority over your past self, right? Like over your former iterations. And that superiority lives alongside, without any contact, the part of you that believes you're a worthless, broken, damaged piece of shit, right? Because most of us have that installed as a
Yeah.
belief. I mean, I would like to say everyone, but at least it's most of us have an experience of a part of us that holds that belief. I would wager that as a psychiatrist, I specialized in working with women who have the most contact with that part relative to a professional like me on the other side of the desk. It took me many, many years to make contact with the part of me that is holding the belief I'm broken, damaged, crazy, right? So when your superiority and your brokenness have no dialogue, there is a lot of fragmentation that happens, and a lot of, what the psychologists call projection, a lot of this experience of these parts of yourself on the outside that you dance with, right? You get into relationship with. And I was just thinking this morning how humility, it's like the only way out, right? And some of us get humbled, by our life experiences, some of us through various modalities like plant medicine, et cetera. But the access to an experience of deep humility it's the blend, right, of those two
Yeah.
parts, it's the bridge between them. And over and over again, in my certainty, because I'm a big, mental gal. I love thinking. I love ideas. I love figuring things out. It's the perfect escape from this, like the burden of this human vessel, right? And and over again, I have come to hold lightly what I was formerly so certain about, to the point where, when I have private conversations with my esteemed colleagues, like my friend and mentor, Tom Cowan, for example, we mostly just acknowledge that we just really don't know, like pretty much anything.
Yes,
you
yes,
know?
and
It,
you kinda have to sometimes, but great point that conspiracy thinking can lead you to not only a victim mentality, but also a savior complex, a kind of
yeah.
paradox in its own way. But I think for me, I have maybe a habit of continuing to invest in friendships that don't really serve me, or I mean, I love my friendships, but maybe they just come with a lot of judgment about my alternative takes, especially when you start entering into everybody having kids and you're doing one thing, they're
Mhm.
doing a different thing. It starts to matter. A time like COVID makes it matter, if you have a mainstream or alternative mindset. And, as a friend and colleague of mine, Gordon White, who the audience will know well, but he referenced you, and we were talking about this in a quote of yours that it's like trying to buy eggs at the hardware store. We're probably not going to get the nourishment we're looking for by expecting our dynamics with certain people to change. As a psychiatrist, I'm curious what you consider a healthy way to deal with feelings like this notion that a lot of our relationships might come with this huge caveat that we're living in vastly different paradigms when it comes to our understandings of health, reality, and pretty much everything.
I love this question. And I think this is really where the rubber meets the road, because in my sort of darker quiet moments that began in around 2020, where I started to really look at my own activist impulse, right? My angry, righteous bitch energy that just flared around all of this, like, I told you so, energy that I brought to family and friends, and of course the bigger stage. And the actual relationships in your real life are enough work for most of us that we don't have to really concern ourselves with the anonymous victim overseas or down the street, or in my case it was almost always mothers and their children, and really trying to insert myself in the decision making around birth and pediatrics, and then of course the care of the mom and her mental and emotional well-being. Like, I got to the point where I felt like if they didn't have the information that I had, something very bad would happen. Like the
Yes.
certainty that I know what their journey is, the hubris, right? And the self-aggrandizement that really comes with that. And I started to neglect, as I would argue most angry activists do, my actual life, my own children, okay? My actual family, and the invitation that every conflict in every real relationship that I had was offering, which is to look inside of myself to relate to the feelings that were coming up, right? So I sometimes joke that the only spiritual practice I need, and I talk about this in my last book, The Reclaimed Woman, is to enter through the upset, right? Which is the ultimate record scratch, especially for women, which is to simply prioritize your emotional state and to take 60 to 90 seconds every time you feel upset about an email or a cataclysm in your life to prioritize being with yourself, simply being with yourself. And, if it's relevant, I can talk about like what that actually looks like. But that reprioritization of the inner gaze, let's say, is actually the pattern disrupt of all the conditioning, the caretaking, the savior complex, the micromanagement, the externalization of focus out there on what everybody else is doing wrong, so that you can fundamentally avoid what is asking for your attention inside. So, I also think that there are stages, right? So as we come to individuate, right, this arc of the hero or heroine's journey, as we come to understand our I am, right? Like who it is that we are as individuals, separate from our family legacies, separate from our, programs, whether they're societal or parental. As we come to understand this, it probably should have happened around adolescence, but for many of us, it happens in our late 30s, 40s. Uh, in this process, there is usually a big no. There is a rupture that exposes your difference from that which you were enmeshed with, right? So how this usually would show up in my clinical practice was with the medical system, right? So you've been a good patient, you've taken your meds, you've adopted your diagnosis, you have done everything that they told you to do. And then one day you experience, let's say, a side effect that's so significant and severe, and it's dismissed, or you're gaslit about it, or whatever it might be. And you start to develop the awareness that they don't care about you the way you care about you. Okay. And that they may have very different priorities, different, incentives, different motivations. And that rupture of empathy, as it's called, is typically the beginning of a journey. And in the end, a gift, right? It's the design of your arc. And that rupture begins the process of that boundary, right? No, it's a no. Usually for many of us, it requires years. I mean, many years where you hold that boundary strong. And what do you do during that time? You find your chosen family, right? You find your tribe, you find your like-minded and like-hearted companions to walk with you, to give you that sense of belonging that your actual family maybe once did or never did, or, in your belief system should, or whatever. And you create very strong boundaries. So there were many years, probably 15 years of my own life, where I didn't interact with somebody who might consider vaccination, for example. I
Mm.
didn't interact with people who engaged pharma.
It's got to be hard to do.
It wasn't hard at all. It was just the nature of that attractive, resonant field. I just I was in a total silo with other like-minded people. And of course, I do this, for a living. So I was able to create online community of people who agreed with my ethos, around personal responsibility and natural medicine. And there were many years that I just dismissed the rest of the world and probably, if I'm honest, dehumanized and um, in my inner world, imagine myself superior, as I was saying.
Hmm.
But over time, as you mature, you legitimize around your core sense of self, and it's okay to interact with others who don't share your belief system because you know what yours is. You're crystallized, right? And it's not so much of a threat. That's why most people, like I just had Byron Katie on my own podcast, and she is one of, many who've done a lot of inner work to come to the conclusion that boundaries really aren't necessary, actually, right? They're not necessary. Later on, that no doesn't need to be a stiff arm. It
Right.
can simply be, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, you
Where
could almost
you,
say the boundaries are kind of like a training wheel to get you to a place
exactly,
where you can almost put them down and it's effortless to protect yourself, or if you that's probably not even the right way to express it, but it's not so important that everyone checks every box on the list. And that's kind of where I'm of two minds, because I really don't care what my friends think about 9/11 or a lot of other things. If we enjoy each other's company and have shared history and we have fun golfing together, who cares? But
totally.
I also think that our opinions, our thoughts on these things are going to matter more, not less, as we go into technocracy, World War III potentially. Like, it's going to matter more, your behaviors and your thoughts, how they determine your actions. And I don't know. So I am of two minds about it. But you mentioned Dr. Tom Cowan, and I did want to talk about your podcast and the stuff I've gotten from the doctors that are in the Brogan sphere, we could say. And
Yeah.
Tom Cowan's definitely one of them. Joe Dispenza's another one. And this is an area where synchronicity came into booking this interview, because I've been deaf in my right ear since I was 3. They said it was meningitis. Maybe it was. Maybe it was vaccine damage. I was 3. Who knows? It's not really a problem, but it has always felt like an unfixable part of my
Mm,
incarnation. Well, a listener wrote me and said, "Hey, dude, if you want to pursue healing, you got to invest in Dr. Joe Dispenza's retreats, because miracles happen there." And then, sure enough, the most recent interview he had at the time was with you, where he
mm,
talks about those miracles: reversing stage 4 cancer, repairing one's own thyroid function. And he told a story of a woman who had 9 inches of her rectum and colon surgically removed because of cancer. And then she regrew all that tissue back and reversed the damage with his protocol of belief and meditation. And that one really stretches even what I would think could be possible.
mhm.
But can you talk to us about his process, or how this process could even work, what you get out of this work? Because clearly you wouldn't interview him if you didn't think that it had a lot of merit, but it's pretty out there.
Absolutely. He reminds me in a lot of ways of my mentor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, but in the last year
No.
of his life, no, okay. So he is, I believe, one of the most important figures in modern medicine, and he tragically passed in 2015. And I had the opportunity to work with him and to be mentored by him in the last year of his life, and it fundamentally changed my life to this day. I feel his energy and presence and his deep faith in the human body. His outcomes over 27 years, he was a pedigreed medical doctor, and his outcomes over his career have yet to be matched in published medical literature. And these include long term, multi decade, like over 30-year survival of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, for example. He had outcomes in terminal cancers, but also neurodegenerative illnesses. And he was very invested in long term evidence for his protocol, which was fundamentally focused on autonomic nervous system rebalancing through nutrition and specific targeted supplementation. And, we talked a bit about this, although, the field, the zeitgeist now, I think, holds the reality of what he was doing far better than it could have 10 years ago, if that makes sense, right? Like the the belief field that his patients entered, that I entered as, his mentee, was so powerful that it offered possibilities that didn't formerly exist. And he used to say to me that fear was contagious, but faith is not, right? That faith has to be born of an inner experience of reconnection with God. And he was a Christian man, actually, and had a very nuanced, deep, complex, I would say, experience of his own theology. And the faith that he brought ignited that within me.
Hmm.
And the outcomes that I went on to publish and that I, experienced through my own protocol, which he helped me to design, can only be explained through the power of that faith. Because otherwise, there's nothing, it's like a little detox, a little diet everybody's already heard of. Like, what's the deal? But it's a field of belief that you enter. And if you are resonant, right, with that field, something unlocks within you. And so, Joe Dispenza speaks similarly about the role of belief and the the invocation of emotional states that can come through these sort of, this is my language, but like self incantations of statements uh, and ideas and thoughts. And I would imagine that I actually am going myself to one of his retreats to experience it, but I imagine that in these large groups, there is, an opening of a portal, for better or for worse.
I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lynn McTaggart, but she has the power
Yes,
of
yes,
eight. And so, yes,
yes,
like her whole thing is taking this structure of belief and then applying it to kind of a group of eight people, which she thinks the data shows is a good number. And then
yes.
you actually get the residual effect, the bounce back effect of just wishing for healing for someone else. It's an interesting mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the interpersonal and relational extension of the decades of placebo and nocebo research that I love to talk about, especially with regard to psychiatry, because it's, in my opinion, undeniable. And there are experts like Irving Kirsch who have written books about, what we can understand as the primary driver of medical outcomes, but he specifically focuses on antidepressants as being the belief that this medication is going to work. And of course, I heard of the placebo effect in medical school, but it was really just sort of brushed off as like a statistical nuisance that you had to control for when you were designing an experiment. And of course, when people get excited about their treatment, good things happen, but it's it's so much more significant a driver of what we are seeing as outcomes attributed to the medical intervention, the pharmaceutical, that you just extrapolate the isolation of the placebo effect, which is arguably what Dispenza is doing and operationalizing. And you can see that even more extraordinary outcomes than would be available through this intervention or this surgery, is going to manage your symptoms expectation. Right. So now people go to his retreats and they expect, you know, seemingly permanent medical liabilities or physiologic, impairments. They expect to resolve those, right? So
Yes.
so the whole frame is an expanded version of what is even offered. It's even for sale through the pharmaceutical model. And you don't really need to go much beyond the placebo effect to understand how that might be possible, but you have to legitimize and appreciate, the role of the placebo effect and how well documented its power is. If you want to stay in the quote unquote like science chat about this, but if you want to get into the more spiritual realm of like accessing different
Yeah.
versions of yourself or different templates and resonant organization of your electrical body, right? Like we could also talk about it through that lens. But I'm not really sure it matters. If people are having these experiences, it only takes one anomaly is all that it should take to disrupt a previously held dogma
Right.
around what is possible.
I agree. And that feedback loop is really interesting. In the interview you had with Dr. Dispenza, he said that the first step is to build up that belief. And if people even come to a retreat, but they still can't really get there mentally, he just shows them the data over and over again until
Right.
they do believe. Now, that is really interesting because, and you use the term incantations. I love that. I actually have talked to a lot of occultists and magic practitioners in previous episodes, and they say the same kind of thing, that the theatrics and the drama around the candles and the robes and the pentagram might be something different, but the robes and the candles and the knives and the this and that and the flowery language, that is just designed to get your mind in the mode of like creating change. And I just find it interesting. Different subcultures, totally separate fields of study, but the mechanisms are there that are similar to get you into the mindset. Now, this is where what you're saying in the power of belief to me is where I have to do some soul searching. And it goes back to the things I said in the intro, because I do consider myself a happy, balanced person. And that's despite all the conspiracy rabbit holes that I'm constantly engaging with and just interested in. But when it comes to like the data, Joe shows people the data until they believe. The data I'm looking at is that EMFs are terrible and glyphosate's killing us and blue light is killing us. Am I building up a negative belief structure because I think that the whole world is toxic? I mean, where do we draw the line between the actual results? Like, I think we're on the same page with a lot of the things we would put in the toxic category. But am I better off just with a ignorance is bliss attitude and believing that it doesn't hurt me? Because I have friends where I'm like, man, I wish I had the stress-free, ignorant life that you have. Because, it's all about belief, apparently, fundamentally. So should I even look at this data? How do we balance those two things?
Yes, this is one of the most important questions there is. And who humbled me around this topic is my own daughters,
Oof.
because there was a day, maybe it was like 3 or 4 years ago, I'm not sure, around a big life transition for me, and coming out of the whatever um pandemic window, and my youngest daughter, who was like a tween at the time, she said to me, "Mama, you're afraid of so many things."
Oof.
And here I am, like, I'm like fucking Joan of Arc or something, right? Like, I think I'm like put on this earth to do this, sacred work as a intellectual warrior, or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever archetype I thought I was tapping into. But what her animal body was feeling is that I'm actually quite afraid. And that was the correction. My especially my youngest is such a guru for me. And that was the correction that I needed to begin to question what it was that I was actually doing and why, and whether or not the impact, at least at this stage for me, and I can only, everybody's I'm glad everybody's in their lane doing their thing, right? Like, for me personally, I had come to the end of the whistle blowing, sounding the alarm, screaming from the mountaintops about all of the dangerous things out there road. And the reason that I did was because I started to see that I was passing the hot potato of fear, and specifically around things like 5G and EMFs. And at that time, I no longer believed in like satellites and that kind of a thing. So it's not, I'd already sort of disabused myself of some of the other big things that are, you cannot control, that are out there. Chemtrails is another big one, right? Like, they're just out there happening to you. And you wake up in what state? Powerless, dependent, helpless, and afraid. Well, that's exactly the state I thought I was leaving when I exited the matrix, so to speak, right? So
Right.
so what have I actually accomplished, or have I fallen into yet another layer? I have colleagues who believe that 5G is a psyop, the whole thing, right? The whole thing. And that the literature is seeded with scary information about how dangerous it is, and it's not even happening. So I'm not suggesting that that's true, because I don't know. I I just love to question and then question again and then question again, because
Yeah.
it's usually a couple of times of questioning, right? Like, how sure am I that mercury is safe? Well, how sure am I that it's actually toxic? How sure am I that it doesn't have a very specific role that threads the needle between the two, right? Like, for
Yeah.
example, and I've come to engage in this repeated line of inquiry, and it has served to relax my system so that I can get to the place where I once again train my focus on what is in my control and on what feels empowering and what feels pleasurable. Okay. So when I trained my focus on those things, I removed it from stuff happening out there, including the news. Like, I was once somebody that people turned to for an interpretation of what was going on in the world. I'm not that person anymore. Nobody's gonna come to my channels to find out how to feel about the Middle East. Okay. Because I have withdrawn all of my attention from everything out there that is happening. And I have radically focused on my inner hygiene, right? I've radically
Yeah.
focused on getting right with myself and orienting my belief system around my innate God given vital power that is very easily tampered with and compromised through these fear based belief fields. And I'm not suggesting that they aren't real. I turn my Wi Fi off every night. We're talking on an Ethernet cord. Okay. So it's not that I'm like have moved away from it, but in all of these arenas, whether it's food or tech or chemical toxicity, I have softened. And that is the arc of the no that I referenced before. What does the softening mean? Does it mean I just stopped giving a shit? No. It means that I use my own body as a yes and no compass. I rely on myself to determine the importance and to give significance to what it is that is actually relevant to me, to my life, to my children's lives. And you don't have to know much more beyond Emoto or Veda Austin's work to know that this is the most powerful way for you to impact the waters of your body, for you to dialogue with God inside of you, right? Is to rest in a state of all the things anyone has ever been telling us: gratitude, ease, acceptance, and the deep knowing that all is okay. you
Yes.
know? And
Yeah.
then the next step will become clear. And it's really because of Veda's work that I have come to commit to this kind of emotional self mastery, because strikes me that it's, you know, harmonizing the gels of my water inside my body is the most powerful way to support my own health, even if there's all sorts of shitty stuff going on around me. I mean, her work has, I think, really, in many important ways, validated that.
Right on. Right on. All good information. And I'm glad you kind of touched on the parenting thing. I was going to bring this up. I don't like to make the show about me personally. I like it to be broad, applicable advice to everyone. I don't know how many parents are out there, but a lot of us will become parents eventually. But when it comes to parenting, I have a 1.5-year-old boy and a 3.5-year-old
Aw.
girl. Yes. And I let my kids play and climb in ways that would make a lot of other lame parents very nervous. The helicopter parents, the uh, overly protective parents. I'm not like that, except when it comes to the toxic stuff. Stop
Yeah.
drinking out of plastic cups. You
No.
can't have processed foods. Get away from my phone. Don't drink
Yeah.
that water. At a park, don't drink that water that's coming from a lead pipe. We do so much work at home to have good quality water. And I see myself almost, just a few years down the line being like a conspiratorial agoraphobic, like I'm almost making my kids afraid of the world, but not in the way conventional people would, but in the way an alternative person would. And I don't want to do that. So I'm glad, you touched on that. It's hard to let go when you want to have your kids avoid all toxins, but the best medicine to me is just looking at how I was raised and how toxic that environment was, and it's just out of ignorance. It's the late 80s and 90s, that's when all this stuff was put out. And I'm pretty much fine. And I only started avoiding stuff at 35 years old. So maybe I can chill on my 3-year-old. But I did want to ask you this. So I know a lot of your clients are women, and I have this
Yeah.
3-year-old daughter, and I know a lot of patterns and problems start young. What are some of the biggest reoccurring problems that you see women dealing with where maybe a dad could help or an upbringing
Mm.
could help? So at least I'm not contributing to creating damaged women unintentionally.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, it's such a deep question. I mean, we could do an entire weekend workshop on the parenting bit because I'm so passionate about this subject. And I, again, have come to some extremely humbling conclusions about how my best intentions to be a cycle breaker were simply a greenwashed version of the
Yes.
control and authoritarian parenting that most of us grew up with. And, I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, and we only knew, listen to authority, punishment, reward. And I was pushed, like so many women in my generation, to succeed and achieve and to never need a man. Right. So to become that feminist prize. And my daughters have inspired me just in time, like just as they became tweens and teens, because I was an absolute like food Nazi. I was not a helicopter parent. And in fact, if you research emotionally immature parenting trends and patterns, you'll find that usually we are very fixated on physical, like health, let's say, but very unavailable emotionally. Right. So I committed early on to never scream at my kids. I've never punished my kids. It wasn't like that. But I would hyper fixate on the supplements in their smoothie and their perfect diet. My kids never, ever, one time ever in their childhood went to a birthday party and ate the freaking pizza and cake. Never.
Mm.
One time when my eldest, I tell this story in my book, uh, she was probably 4.5 or 5. And we went trick or treating, and I used to collect all the garbage candy and replace it with like organic, alternatives or whatever. And I thought that she had eaten a bite size Snickers, like while we were walking, because I looked in her little bucket and I didn't see it, but I saw her collect it from one of the doors. And I don't have to yell to be scary. It's a
Yeah. Neither does my
strange
wife.
it's strange, skill that I've cultivated. And I made her cry because I accused her and gaslit her around eating this stupid Snickers, which we later found, which she did not eat. And I
Yeah.
will never forget that, right? Becoming the monster that I was supposedly fighting. And the question that I invite a lot of parents to ask as they intend to keep their children physically safe is, does this read as love? Right?
Mm.
Does it feel like love?
Yeah.
Because one day recently, one of my daughters said to me, because the last vestige for me has been the tech stuff, right? So I still to this day struggle, with having left the Waldorf system and whatever, with a generation, because my kids are teenagers now, but with a generation of kids who have a different relationship to technology than I did. Simply it's the difference that I struggle with. And anyway, so she said, so I used to set this really firm boundary at like 9 o'clock. Uh, I call it a tech surrender. Like all the tech
Yeah.
is going and gone. And I used to enforce that pretty intensely. It was like the last thing to go. And one day my daughter was like, Mama, it's so much more helpful if you, because she's 13 at this point, if you guide me. She said that word, guide me, and then let me figure it out.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like that's something my 3-year-old would already say to me. And the tech is going to be the hardest.
I don't know what age that, would make the most sense. However, I do believe in the Steinerian concept of the 9-year change as being like a pretty significant, you know, individuation point. And I know that that's when I used to. So my kids chose to go to school against my will.
Ah,
They had a year home with me, and I guess I didn't make it cool enough. Now, I think the bigger issue is that I didn't have enough same aged or similar age community to make it appealing to tweens and teens. Anyway, whatever, they chose to go back to school. And I used to institute this thing called Kelly School. It was like 2 hours a month that I would sit them down and I would have an hour to offer them another perspective about cosmology or health or whatever. Sometimes I would teach them like kinesiology and muscle testing or whatever, like simple stuff, how to ask for things.
manifestation, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I would just have an hour and I would come up with my little thing I was going to show them. And ultimately, I was called out on that because I've raised my girls to ally with their, yes and their no, and to not do things that they don't want to do. And my youngest was like, you say that, but then I don't want to do this, and you are making me do this, or you get upset about it, and then it's about your feelings. And I was like, oh wow, here I am
Yeah.
repeating the cycle in my own greenwashed way. So I surrendered that. And I have come to recognize that if I want to share something, first of all, I set a container. I ask for the opportunity to do that. Or if I just want to say, like, hey, don't drink the tap water, I'll attempt to do it in a way that is invitational. Like, for example, it is extremely important to me. I'm like a natural birth zealot. Okay. And it's
Oh
been one of
man.
the topics that's been very difficult for me to integrate that superiority sense of like there's a better way and a worse way to do it, according to me. And, with free birth on one end of the spectrum and, an elective cesarean on the other, or whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm still, like I'll see a baby swaddled in a hospital blanket and my heart shuts closed. It's still to this day something that I am exploring. Anyway, so when I think about my daughters and the births that they're going to have, and I think about, uh, you know, the prospect of their choosing to have a medicalized birth, I literally, I like want to explode. I can't hold it yet. Okay. So I know that that's a lot of polarity I'm creating. And if I come at them with all the scary reasons why they should never have a hospital birth, which I mean, I have expertise in the scary reasons. I've published, articles on all the scary, horrible things that can happen to you if you elect to engage obstetrical interventions that are certainly not evidence-based, that are consensus medicine, and that have nothing but physiologic, psychological, and emotional injury to confer. Okay, so I can scare people out of going to the hospital for sure. And I know that's not the way. Why? Because I know that the invitation, that the inspiration, that all I have to do, which of course is what I have done, even talking about their own births, is to express the extraordinary opportunity that natural birth presents and why. It is this life-giving, life-changing portal that is inbuilt into a woman's system for her to experience, you know, her connection to God and the life force in a way that cannot ever be replicated or even t- touched in any other arena of her life, and what it is to connect to your baby in that way, to start life in that way, to recognize, the perfection of the design of every aspect of the birth experience, whatever. I could go on and on.
Well, let me just cut in to say you say that, and I agree. Like this is the thing. My wife agrees too. Even in her friend group, they're all having kids around the same time. She's going the natural way. No one else is. They're all like, "Why are you putting yourself through more pain? Why, the conventional things you hear all the time." Well, this is where the alternative really kind of let us down. The first kid was born in a birthing center. Because of an elevated heart rate, it turned into an emergency C-section. The last thing my wife wanted. She was pissed about it,
Yeah.
and then it turns out that, all these concerns we had about her not being able to bond or my daughter's immune system, there really was no effect that we can measure. Of course, you can't measure the reality against a potential hypothetical and what would have
Yeah.
happened. But as far with our critical eye, we see no ill effects. Then, when our son was born about 2 years later, she's like, fuck that birth center. I'm having this kid at home because
Yeah.
they are the ones who got us into the system. So she's like, I'm doing this at home. She ignored warning signs of preeclampsia from the doctors. She signed waivers that said, I don't care that my blood pressure is above a certain level. I'm doing this at home. She had our son, and then less than a minute later had a seizure in our bed. And so I'm strapping a 1 minute old baby into a car seat and following an ambulance down to the hospital because my wife's almost dying. So, I feel a little betrayed by the alternative. It was really rosy and, maybe we romanticized it, but man, was it tough. And I had Christiane Northrup on the podcast, and we're reading books about orgasmic birth. I'm like, not only is
Yeah.
this not going to hurt, baby, we're going to have a great time. And instead,
Yeah.
she almost dies. And in both cases, I guess she feels like she got her natural birth, but
Mhm.
in both cases, I'm the one who had to see what she was unconscious for, which was the hardest fucking part. You know, so it's hard to hate the medical system and also get sucked into this shit.
Exactly. That tension is absolutely the hardest road to walk, what you all have been through. And I wonder, she's not here to get her perspective, but I wonder what her ultimate take is and if she feels like, oh wow, I wish I had listened, and had stayed the obstetrical course and had my hospital birth the second time, or if she accepts everything.
Yeah, the latter for sure. She doesn't have any regrets, but
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what I figured. And so then it comes down to you and your role, which is what you asked me originally in the question before I went on a big ramble about the role that men can play in, I would say, generally women's lives, but specifically in their daughters' lives and maybe by extension, their wives. And as somebody who had a very biased uh, sort of alliance, I guess, with the women in my practice. And I was a reproductive psychiatrist, so most of my patients would go through the pregnancy experience at some point in our work together. And I really didn't have any idea how to interact at the time with their partners. And their partners, their husbands typically, were quite disoriented, like around like what are they supposed to be doing here, right? Like who are they serving, right? Who are they supporting? Like what is their role? And I actually am of the sort of like cultural belief that it's pretty unnatural for the man to be the other person in the room relative to a bunch of other family, blood related females and community,
yeah, or
you know.
midwives with a lot of experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are historically we have whatever that means historically, but we have had other women around to support the process, and like you said, experienced women, meaning that they have experienced their own births, not necessarily that they have licensure as conferred by the government or whatever. And I I believe that men are pretty ill equipped to hold space and to contain because they haven't ever been told that that's their role, right? Okay, so like if your woman says I want to have a natural birth, you could argue or well, I could argue that your role is to make sure that happens. Even when she doubts herself, even when it seems, like it's a scary thing that she's wanting to do, right? To support her vision in every way that you know how, which it sounds like is exactly what you did, and to stay non-reactive, right? Like cool, calm, and collected. Well, how do you do that as a man, right? This is the way bigger question that we have on a societal level is how do we support men in their emotional self-regulation? Because a man's emotional self-regulation resolves Pretty much every societal problem that we have, right? Whether it's, violence and crime, or it's, domestic abuse and issues, or whether it's just the relational strife that, women seem to be complaining of and calling every man a narcissist these days, right? So a man's emotional self-regulation is, one of several linchpins that I can identify. Um, Women no longer imagining that they know better how another woman should be a woman is another one, right? Like there's certain things that I've observed that could change the fabric of social reality as we know it overnight. And of course, men can't learn to self regulate overnight, but that commitment, that prioritization, what does that actually look like? What does that mean that they need, right? How do they do that? I don't know actually, but I have observed that men who co regulate around other men, right? So whether it's in the martial arts setting or, other forms of meditation and vipassana and self-containment and self-regulation, however men can get to the place where your body, your physical body being in a room with other men, women and children offers regulation through stillness, right? Through your calm heartbeat, right? These aren't things you can just want. These are this is a reclamation of your nervous system that is necessary. And it also means that you're no longer going to make decisions from that reactive place, right? Like I can't remember who ever gave me this example, but I love it because it's like, if a man who just starts to learn how to fight goes into a bar, let's say, and somebody gives him like a sideways look. Like he may even want to provoke the fight to practice and like demonstrate, his prowess or whatever. But a seasoned martial artist might be in the same situation and he would just cast a glance back and the person who might have been otherwise provoking him would walk out the door. Right? So like that kind of embodied energetic masculinity is something that comes through, mentorship, right? It comes through group based, the natural phenomenon of women working with women, men working with men. And it comes from the prioritization of that by a society and a culture that says, we're interested in restoring and then expanding upon the potential of polarity, no longer like punishing and victimizing and shaming men for their behavior, blaming them for the ills of society, and imagining that somehow women are just these like hapless victims of what it is that we've been experiencing for centuries, millennia, whatever history timeline you choose to take a look at. So, to my mind, the role of the father, specifically when it comes to daughters, but you could extrapolate, is to offer safety.
Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I try to interpret explosive emotional outbursts somewhat as like what you're trying to say is you don't feel like you have control right now. And maybe you don't, you don't get control all the time. And I struggle with, is this issue right here because you're 3 or because you're a volatile female or because your astrology suggests you're going to have this kind of personality? Like there's all kinds of factors in the soup of what makes a person. And so sometimes I'm like, should I just wait 2 years and this will go away? Or do I correct it now to not create a pattern? I definitely overthink, just like with the toxicity stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. They say is just maybe let them feel emotionally safe. I like to think that is true, but maybe with all my paranoia about the world around her, she feels like she can't extract as much control as she would like.
I mean, there is a rubric that's really helpful to me, and has been over the course of my mothering journey, and it is different. Fathers and mothers are very different entities. Has been to consider the mirror, right? Like that, whatever it is that your kid is making you feel, quote unquote, is exactly what they are feeling,
Mm,
right? So you feel frustrated, exasperated, like at the end of your rope, whatever, that it now you know exactly what they're feeling, and you can give words to that, right? Like you can say simple phrases like, you're upset. You're upset, right? You can get down on their eye level and you can offer, you know, attunement. So this concept of attunement is what most of us, at least in my generation, were missing from our fathers, which is the capacity that a man has to read his own system for clues about what it is that he's seeing, right? So he can then offer what is needed to what's in front of him. You can't offer in an attuned way if you're just a shitstorm inside and you can't even observe what's in front of you. So the attuned man notices body language. He notices, a subtle, eyelid, movement in his kid. He notices things and he has the capacity to offer his system, again, whether it's a hug or a hand on a shoulder or just a gaze, just getting on the level, whatever it is. Quietly allowing for the arc of an emotion. Emotions always have an arc to move through, right? Before he starts yapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guilty.
That
Guilty of that.
Well, we all are. We all are because we were not well regulated and attuned to as kids, right? So this is the legacy, emotional legacy of immature parenting, emotionally immature parenting, right? So that is a form of safety, but it also gets broader and wider because a daughter wants to know that her father is a protector, right? She wants to know that he is a monster in him, right? This is the dark masculine that is usually castrated out of men
Yeah.
by their wounded and injured mothers,
That's why she likes
right?
Beauty and the
So
Beast so much.
exactly. Uh, I haven't read fiction in like 15 years because I've been an obsessive, learner, whatever. And my daughter's really into A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I actually decided to start reading the series with her. And it's like a fiction series about, it's kind of like fairy smut actually, but it's like, about fairies and I am so fascinated by the male archetypes that are in this fiction because it's all about how they relate to that yang energy, that dark masculine energy, and how these men embody it differently. And the reclamation of that dark masculine energy, which is the aggressor, right? It also includes your sexual claim and capacity to assert that. Okay. Uh, is the breaking of a cycle of abuse that is handed down by mothers to sons specifically, right? It's the emotional incest that so many young boys experience when they imagine that it's their job to emotionally regulate their mother rather than learn to develop a relationship with their own healthy aggression. And some would argue that that starts the first time a baby infant boy bites his mom's nipple and she says, "Don't do that. You hurt me." Right. Like instead of mirroring his aggression and offering him, validation of that and maybe, another putting her finger in his mouth or whatever, instead he can bite on or whatever might be an alternative expression. So as men come to develop a relationship with this monster, right? With this wildness inside of them, they can point it out towards the world, right? They can direct it against anything, right? And they can create a safe home for that family. That is the protector archetype. But when that monster energy gets turned even a little bit indoors towards, especially a daughter, right? In the form of punishment or abuse of any variety, be it verbal, physical, sexual, then there is a lot of confusion for that woman to unwind and a degree of unsafety that she will experience navigating the world. And this is my specialty, right? So then I I show up on the scene to support women in cultivating that safety within on a nervous system level and then on a relational level, because otherwise you're just going to keep searching for it like a little girl,
Ugh,
honestly,
yeah.
on the outside in your relationships with the impossible dynamic that reminds you of that unsafety, hoping, praying that one day that man will give you that exhale. And of course, he's not. Those relationships can't possibly offer that to you, right? So, how it is that you can choose a man who has the capacity to offer you that safety, that requires that you reorient your nervous system towards the accurate perception of safety. And so it really is like legacy level unwinding of these handed down experiences of trauma that I see so many of us in the midst of right now. It's a pretty cool time, to be entering into relationships with this degree of awareness and choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good advice. I definitely will think about that in the times where it's tough to think about anything and not just
Hmm.
react. But so much stuff for me to think about. Really was a conspiracy podcast host therapy session. So I appreciate it. But as we are wrapping up, tell people about the books, the courses, all that good stuff, the links they need if they want more Kelly Brogan in their lives.
Thank you. I love this conversation, and your questions were so thoughtful and really almost lifted from my own mind. Things that I've considered deeply along my own journey. So yeah, I mean, so speaking of my journey, it's been 15-year process of studying the hero or heroine's journey and seeing the stages, and I have really collected that into two programs, one for nervous system healing, which I've referenced, called Vital Mind Reset, to send that signal of safety, and the other for relational healing for women, that is called Reclaimed, and really helping women to recognize the power that they have in their marriages as mothers and around their careers, to come into a feminine kind of power that isn't what we are instructed about on the world stage of feminist programming. And I have these together as what I call the relaxed woman system, because I've decided that that is the crown jewel of a woman's experience, is to come into a relaxed body. And I know that when I am around relaxed women, I feel so much more aware of the sparkle and glitter and potential and beauty and magic of this incarnation than I do when I'm around tense, bitter, overwhelmed, overachieving women who are in their, scarcity and control based responses. So it's aspirational, I think, for all of us to get to that place. So yeah, that's all over at kellybroganmd.com.
Awesome. Well, I enjoyed this a lot. I know I request a lot of time. Thanks for taking me up on it and keep doing what you do and take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And boom goes the dynamite, people. The great and ever talented Dr. Kelly Brogan. Ugh. I told myself I wouldn't cry, but I guess Roman's birth is just harder for me to talk about than I realized. But I think about it plenty. Just saying it out loud, I guess, kind of knocked me off my game for a minute, but the show must go on. With those kind of situations, you want to just trust the universe and say, well, this is a natural process. It doesn't need the hospital system. But neither birth in our family really went that way. And even after being super vigilant with diet and exercise and everything the natural home birth books say, it all felt like a waste of time because of the issues that came up in labor and delivery. It's like 9 months of putting so much extra energy into optimizing the growth of these babies in the womb. And then both of my kids end up in the EMF artificial light voids that are hospitals. So why worry so much about sleeping near a cell phone when you're 6 months pregnant? I guess we do what we can. And maybe that was a lesson I didn't learn at the time that I started to learn today with this one, because Dr. Brogan was really great. I have to apologize to her and her team because we recorded this well over a month ago at this point. Rarely do we have such a situation, but Richard Dolan had to jump the line because we were talking about current events and recent whistleblowers. Same with Mark Goodwin. We wanted to get that out while the stablecoin bills were being voted on. And then Matthew Arrett also had a few elements of recent news, and Jay Widener was waiting a while, and we wanted to get Gordon out, of course. His course is coming up, and we're talking about elements of the cycle. So it landed the way it landed, and it actually is a nice companion show to Gordon, because I ended up actually telling an anecdote in this one, not even knowing there'd be a Gordon show anywhere in the vicinity of this. But I guess that's why it has come up, because those conversations with Gordon talking about shadow work and wounds turning into gifts and all that, it stuck out in my mind. And so this ended up being kind of about a similar thing. And now they're companion episodes for the people who like that. Yeah, they complement each other. And if you think this inner work direction is interesting, that's a beautiful thing. And I'm sorry for the double dose for those who would rather we look at the external world, but maybe there's something in there about you to look at. And that's the way these things always go. Some of it probably sounds a bit trite or obvious, but really, what are we going to do about the awful shit going on out there? Yes, a possibly white black guy with a gun pulled up and got a perfect parking spot right in front of the Blackstone Tower in Manhattan and walked right in with a rifle in plain view and killed himself on the 33rd floor when he was done terrorizing. And yes, they're telling us that he did this because he was mad at the NFL about his CTE at age 27, but got on the wrong elevator, even though there's eyewitness videos of a woman getting arrested on the street who was with him while the cops try to keep her off camera and run around the corner. And yeah, another witness said he was shouting "Free Palestine" and had the flag over his face. But is doing a deep dive on another false flag psyop media manipulated mass shooter event just a warped version of a wine mom's true crime obsession? Is a deep dive into this case maybe a clever diversion from doing your own inner work or moving closer towards your own goals and dreams? Who am I to say? Anyway, hearing Kelly's stories from being a bit further down the line of parenting than me were super helpful. I'm really going to ease up on how I've been acting with my kids. I still have time to turn it around because there's not some deep impression of me being overbearing or paranoid about toxicity this early. We have a lot of food planted in the yard. I should celebrate the wins, right? My kids pick cherries, mulberries, and cranberry hibiscus leaves right off the bush going to and from the car. Maybe the Aquafina bottle isn't going to kill them. Maybe it's okay that the restaurant doesn't have organic fruit if we have it at home. Maybe my overall relationship with my kids being less combative and authoritarian is more important, and reducing their stress and anxiety about the world does more to set them up for long-term success. Are we leading households to live in paranoia or empowerment? Important question for me to ask over the next period of time, maybe always, and I'm sure I'm not alone. These things are worth thinking about before the unconscious patterns get worn in and change becomes hard. I don't know how many listeners are parents, new or old, or think these sorts of things are interesting, but I thought that was a good use of my time with Kelly in particular, and the other stuff too. The warped field of conventional psychiatry. I never get sick of beating that drum. Revisiting the need to challenge germ theory, talking about a really mind-blowing example like Dr. Joe Dispenza. I can't believe the stuff that I'm hearing coming out of those retreats. Sounds like magic. And I am a big fan of that saying of hers that it's like you're trying to buy eggs at the hardware store. Of course, that speaks to repeatedly asking people to be different than they are or offer you something they don't tend to give or aren't able to give. I agree, that is a dumb mistake to continue to make, but you can't always just get to acceptance and humbly remind yourself that there are no perfect people and maybe you should refill your own well if you can. Because at this point in my life, I don't really need the people around me to be much more than fun, enjoyable people to laugh with, bonded over a shared history. I've just been the crazy black sheep guy on the edge of so many friend groups at this point that I'm very comfortable there, even if I think that impression of me is kind of played out and I'm actually quite tame and level-headed, but that's fine. There's not much I feel like I'm missing from social interactions except good laughs and a type of lightness. So, yes, the first hour went really well. In the second hour, we got into things like understanding the emotional roots of illness and how that German new medicine approach works with various things, understanding sexual health and STDs from a German new medicine perspective, that personal meta narrative importance, the role of mindset in health decisions, navigating medical systems and interventions and SSRIs. All really good stuff. The last bits there are basically where Kelly shines. They are her specialty, but I wanted to start with some less expected stuff for people who have heard Kelly talk before on her own podcast or in other interviews. Still, today's a good day to dust off the Dr. Pill Pusher song from the last time we talked about the dangers of SSRI, so that's easy for me. But before we do that, in higher side news, I can't say I'm doing much more than staying the course. I hope Plus members got some good time with the Clip Genie transcript archive while it was available to everyone. TV subs are also good now. I'm less concerned about it all. I thank everyone who appreciates the video or just jumped into the higher tier to offer a higher level of support. I can say that this has been the right move, the studio thing. I still think we have some sound consistency issues to iron out, but with so many guests in different random remote recording environments, it's tough. That's not exactly the forte of the guys working in the studio, and it shouldn't be expected of them, but we're working on it. And I also want to dial in email notifications for the video that include a direct link so you don't have to randomly check the website or follow me on any platform if you don't want to. I'm also still very determined to get the video streaming to work with the Safari browser. As I've said, you need a special license from Apple to do that, and I can't seem to get my developer account to renew, and support is just running me in circles, but I won't give up on that because that's not something we can just let go of and not have. But yes, otherwise, I would say pretty much smooth sailing. I just checked the rating for the last episode with Gordon the White, and I would expect no less a generous 4.7 from the Plus people. I'm happy, you're happy. Maybe this one will work out similarly then because of the similar themes, but don't worry, I'm not going all inward shadow work all the time. Although, speaking of, did you see Ice Age Farmer is back after 2.5 years of absence? And it seems like that might be the direction he's going to, though it's a little too early to say. But great show with Gordon. I saw some of the comments that he's too doom and gloom, and I think those people are really missing the point. He's very optimistic about getting through a very rough part of the cycle and out to the other end. Just because the forecast is a little gloomy doesn't mean he's doom and gloom. I think there's a distinction there worth making. And I do think the Civil War U.S. divorce prediction is bold and wild. But let's just see. Let a prediction be what it is. Let a predictor predict. Let a forecaster forecast. But clearly most people did get it and did like it. It's got a 4.7. Can't ask for much more. And on to the meetup calendar. August 1st. I think I'll have this out on August 1st, but it looks like people are meeting up at Danger Dave's Shit Talk Circle, and that is in Bentonville, Arizona. And then that's also the one where Marduk the Sun God will be there, previous THC guest. Get at it. August 8th, Astoria, Oregon, at the Astoria Brewing Company. August 9th, Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Raleigh Brewing Company. And then August 10th, the Sour Duck Market in Austin, Texas. Okay. August 16th, Wainwright, Alberta, Canada, a meetup at Wallace Park. And August 27th, Black Rock City, Nevada. Okay, that one looks like it is related to Burning Man. So if you're into that subculture, let's let the worlds collide, right? So good stuff. Find like-minded locals and expand your network. Highersidemeetups.com. Go forth and use what we have. It's free to everyone and just openly available. So that's the show, I guess. Thanks again to Kelly for being just so willing to talk about kind of personal, difficult things sometimes. The fact that she's gone to that level 11 on the slider, the conspiracy slider, and then also has this background in psychiatry, and parenting and relationships. I know personally I'm going to be carrying this episode forward for probably years, many more years than most episodes. So this is a personal one for me, I suppose. It's good medicine, and I hope I'm not alone there. Otherwise, it's just a weird voyeurism thing where you're watching me try to improve myself and just moving on with your day. But all right, well, take care of you and yours. I've done my part. Your move, big Harma pill pushers, paranoid conspiracy parents, and metaphysical narrative hijackers. Your fucking move.
You got a problem that they gave you, choking out answers that they made you. To think this kind of way can work, is the meaning of insane, dude. You gotta be stronger than you think you are, my friend, and way brighter than you look. Gotta face some stark, dark difficulty. Lift your jawbone off the hook. Say, Dr. Pill Pusher, mind shusher, brains grabbing, money taking, thoughts squisher. You need me more than I need you, and it's time that I withdrew. You can say it ain't that easy. You can say, hey, you don't know me. You can make all the excuses, but what's the uses? Just go on and live free. The system's out to make you crazy, make you sad and break you down. To think all that is a burden, but to know it is a crown. You gotta be stronger than you think you are, my friend, and way brighter than you look. Gotta face some stark, dark difficulty. Lift your jawbone off the hook. Say, Dr. Pill Pusher, mind shusher, brains grabbing, money taking, thoughts squisher. You need me more than I need you, and it's time that I withdrew. You can say it ain't that easy. You can say, hey, you don't know me. You can make all the excuses, but what's the uses? Just go on and live free. The system's out to make you crazy, make you sad and break you down. To think all that is a burden, but to know it is a crown. On and live free.
Oh, you're still here. I thought we were done. Well, there you have it. Another great entry into the deep and robust THC archive that goes back over 15 years at this point. Peruse it all at thehighersidechats.com and take advantage. And now that that interview is over and we're winding down, I can talk to you a bit more casually about what it is we do here. Because again, you just heard or watched the first hour of a 2-hour interview on a show that has gone to great lengths to stay outside of the ad sponsor monetization model and instead opted to maintain true independence through subscriptions only. Over time, I've done a lot to improve the Plus member experience and tried to keep convenience and quality of life in mind, which many paid offerings sadly do not do. But let's talk about some of the details that tend to be on people's mind when they consider making the leap. So if you are someone who just listens to the audio, as the show has been for many years, we have the same long-running THC Plus subscription for $8 a month, 5 new shows a month, and the full archive, no seasons or breaking it up in weird, sketchy ways. We have a great on-site player with all the bells and whistles. You can download full episodes and listen offline, and there is a lively comment section and a 5-star rating system on each episode page, so I can see what Plus members tend to like best. We also found a way around the annoying need to put in your username and password when using the private RSS feed in many of the podcasting apps. Now we have your subscription data built right into the link on the My Account page. Just copy it and paste it in pretty much any podcasting app and you are done. If it ever freezes up on you or stops loading or anything, you can even regenerate yourself a new URL on the same My Account page. It's an upgrade that truly does make it much easier than it used to be, and we even take it one step further. When you first sign up for a membership, we send you a welcome email that includes that link. Again, you just copy it, paste it, boom, you're in. And I know accessing the main show in an ongoing way is really just the only thing 90% of Plus members want, but if you do get into the website, you will find some old bonus episodes and live events on the bonus content page, the old cover songs I used to close the show out with, as well as some of the new ones I've made recently. And you also get a lifetime forum membership where we have all sorts of interesting categories and threads, including the best place to get a guest request to me. People ask me about that pretty regularly, but how could I not put added weight to Plus member recommendations? So there you go, hint, hint. Now, in June of 2025, I made the big leap to video. It seemed like that's what a growing number of people wanted, but the fear was over being able to deliver episodes in video conveniently behind a paywall because it's a lot more challenging than it is with just audio, though we did figure it out. Although streaming video does have a lot of extra cost to it, go figure. And that is why we added the new tier of THC Plus TV for people who want that video without changing the price for those who don't really care. So for $12 a month, you can get the full shows in video with captions and a nice word search and all the features of the audio player, as well as Android and Apple casting from your phone to TV. That's nice. I also sweetened the $12 tier with one other important feature that has ongoing costs to keep updated, and that's a Clip Genie archive of all THC episodes going back to the beginning. And what Clip Genie does is allow you to search by any word and be served up all the transcripts of all the episodes that have included that word and a clickable link to start the episode right at that point in the show. It's very slick. People have asked for transcripts for a long time because episodes are so information dense, and this was a way for me to not only provide that, but make them all searchable with a system that provides everything a person could want for finding exactly what they're looking for with the hundreds of episodes there are. All right, so if you think I'm good at what I do and you appreciate the extra effort I make to try to come prepared and lead our guests through the most compelling parts of their work, I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for you to get twice as much of the content you already like for $8 or $12 a month. I've used this analogy before, but we tip $8 for all sorts of services these days without even thinking about it, especially in this new world of the dumb tablet checkouts where they pre-highlight 20% and make you feel bad for switching it to anything else. And when you tip $8 because someone brought you a sandwich from the back, nobody brings you a second sandwich. I know ad-supported podcasting makes it seem like it should all be free, but independence is worth something, especially in this counterculture field, and there's no way to make a viable career out of it otherwise. Some people will say, well, what about value for value? But I tried that first, and big donations came with aggressive guest suggestions, and that just doesn't work for our type of format, though it may work for other formats. Either way, the subscription model has not let me down in 15 years, and I thank those who sign up, and I hope more people do. I try to make it worth it. As for the typical questions I get that might help you decide or speed up your onboarding, usually I get, where is the second hour? Because unlike other shows, I don't split each episode into 2 files because I find that to be inconvenient. You've got to find the other one and then load that up, and it stops in the middle, and you might have to hear 2 introductions and 2 wrap-ups. It's a little bit clunky, but no. Plus members get the full 2-hour conversation just as it was had in a single file. I always ask for the promo stuff last, so I cut right before that and splice it onto the first hour, and that is how the free hour is made, and I just strip out the rest. So it still sounds pretty whole for free hour listeners, as you just heard, and I do prefer it that way. And when you're logged into the website, all the shows magically switch over to the Plus shows. So it's seamless, and that seamlessness has caused confusion before. But just look at the show length if you're unsure, and know that you cannot be logged in and be seeing the free first hour episodes. Trust me. I spared no expense. They call me the John Hammond of conspiracy podcasting. I don't say that. Other people say that. So yes, if you just signed up and you want to go back and listen to older episodes, you do have to skip ahead about 50 minutes to hear the new content. But once you are a member, you'll be much happier with the full show in a single file and not maintaining 2 feeds and jumping from file to file just to hear one interview. Another common question I get asked is if Plus members have to listen through the website. And of course, the answer is no. We have that custom tokenized RSS link that works with many of the podcasting apps. And the site is built to have some nice tools included to make it easier and more fun to listen, but it's not necessary. Spotify is the only weird one. To get Plus on Spotify, you must sign up through Patreon because they have a corporate partnership together. Honestly, we know how the game is played. I don't have to go too deep into it here, but yes, major corporations have taken over the internet. They get everyone reliant on a handful of convenient platforms, and then they push out the controversial content. Even though I try to stay integrated for your convenience as much as I can, but some of that stuff can change at any time, and that is why I always prioritize and maintain my own independent website. But that's it, really. I don't want to front load the show with too heavy of a pitch because then it sounds like an ad when I like to say we're ad free. Sponsorship free and independent is a little more accurate. But because the video has complicated some things, it just seemed best to run through all of it and slap it at the very end of these episodes so your questions and concerns could be answered. And hopefully I've convinced you that it's worth it. Sign up at thehighersidechats.com or right in the show notes or the episode description. Again, we send you that welcome email with the private tokenized RSS link right there, so you never have to log into the website if you don't want to. And if you sign up for video, we are going to be sending the new episode notifications there too, where you click the link and it logs you in automatically and you're right there to stream it. So I'm doing what I can. Help me help you. Double your pleasure, double your fun, and get twice as much with THC Plus. And that's all there is. There isn't any more.